ओम नमः श्री यतिराजाय विवेकानंद सूरये सच्चित सुख स्वरूपाय स्वामिने तापहारिणे. We were discussing the second sutra of the second chapter in Patanjali's Raj Yoga, or Patanjali's Yoga Sutras rather, which dealt with concentration and its methods, how to attain concentration. And we saw tapah, tapasya, swadhyaya, that is study, and surrendering the fruits of work to God, that is Ishvara pranidhana. These are the three constituents of Kriya Yoga. So Swamiji was discussing, we were discussing the what exactly swadhyaya means. So Swamiji says intellectual gymnastics are not enough or not very important, in the sense it helps us, it prevents us from following anything blindly. That's all. That's its only purpose. It does the work of a street cleaner, but we have to walk along the road ourselves. That is entirely a different issue altogether. So though intellectual gymnastics, as it is known, normally do not help us beyond a certain point. So we assume that a person who has done swadhyaya has passed the argumentative state. The desire to argue, to discuss, or desire to do vada, means argue over certain things, sometimes silly things. So that intention or that desire should not be there. So Swamiji says, do not argue. If anyone forces his argument upon you, there are some people who not with the idea of getting some kind of knowledge, but just for the sake of argument, they argue and try to disturb our faith. So if somebody forces some kind of argument upon us, Swamiji's advice is that we should be silent, because any disturbance that is caused by ourselves trying to argue certain aspects of what we believe in, or trying to answer or respond to certain things, arguments placed before us by others, can both be harmful. They can disturb the mind. So the yogi has to keep silent and not allow the mind to be disturbed either by himself or by others by provoking him. And his goal should be very clear. Swadhyaya means to get that knowledge which enables you to go beyond the senses. The goal of the yogi should never be forgotten, that he has to go beyond the senses, beyond the reactive mind or manas, and establish himself in buddhi. Not the lower buddhi or the manas, but the higher mind, where he can distinguish between the temporary and the permanent, and hold on to the eternal, and not be carried away by the transient or the temporary. So that is possible only if you transcend the senses. So one should see that every argument done for the sake of argument throws the mind out of balance, as it were, Swamiji says. And it creates a disturbance in the chitta. And that disturbance is a drawback. That will give rise to further samskaras. As it is, our chitta is full of old samskaras, which just need a small impetus to rise to the surface. They are already there deep below the surface. But the moment we try to agitate, when we try to think or try to argue without any reason, it creates a disturbance in our mind which evokes a response from the chitta, and all the old samskaras come to the surface, and it creates further disturbance. So this disturbance in the chitta or the mind stuff is a very big drawback. So argumentations and the search after truth through reason are only by the way. I mean, they should be, they are just the means to reach to a point where all arguments should stop. There are much we have to understand. The yogi has to understand that there are much higher things which are beyond the level of the intellect. So intellect is an incomplete, though it is an important instrument to rise above buddhi also. After having served its purpose, the buddhi tells you to get an intuitive understanding or a direct experience above its own range. Buddhi has a certain range. It can help you, it can help us to avoid crude mistakes, which the manas or the reactive mind does. Our reactive mind has a tendency to mistake the temporary for the permanent, thinking that these temporary things are permanent or the transient things are of an eternal nature. That is the input or the capacity of the reactive mind, which are largely controlled by our sensory inputs, the senses. The senses indirectly or directly uh, take us to the reactive mind, and the reactive mind takes certain decisions based on what it sees. It's more of a reaction to some input rather than a conscious or a deliberate thinking. That is the realm or the that is the area where buddhi comes into function. But even that buddhi, Swamiji says, we have to transcend, because the buddhi sometimes will take you round and round. No doubt it is a better source of information or better source of knowledge than manas. But even at that level, at the level of the Vijnanamaya Kosha, it gives you some glimpse of the intuitive experience. But to get the real experience, you have to transcend that. So what we do is we surrender all the fruits of our work to God, Ishvara Pranidhana, and don't attach ourselves to anything. Don't take the credit nor take the blame, but to give up both to the Lord and be at peace. Now, what does it mean? It is for the sake of not. It is for the sake of peace, or it is for the sake of avoiding any kind of disturbance. This Ishwar Pranidhana has been suggested by Patanjali. It's not just for the sake of cultivating devotion, as Bhakti scriptures tell us to do. The function is the same. But Ishvara Pranidhana here means surrendering the fruits of the Lord, fruits of our work to the Lord. So when we do that, we are at peace. Oh, then and then only we are at peace. We try to do certain actions and expect a certain result. Then our mind is agitated if that result is not achieved. And if that result, even if that result is achieved, then we are elated. And that also causes some kind of disturbance in the mind. So in either case, whether you get the result or you don't get the result, there is this kind of agitation, a kind of disturbance in the chitta, which affects our concentration. So surrendering the fruits of work, the Kriya Yoga, the work that we do, the sadhana that we do, everything has to be dedicated to the Lord, because in that case, what happens? It is done for the sake of the Lord. So we don't get involved. We neither take the credit nor we take the blame, but give up both to the Lord and be at peace. So the only way to obtain peace, to obtain a semblance of stability or balance in our life, to see that the chitta does not get agitated, is to surrender the fruits of our actions or the work that we do, which is part of our duty, to the Lord and be at peace. So that is the secret of Ishvara Pranidhana. That is what Swamiji says. Now we come to the next sutra. After practicing Kriya Yoga for a long time, we discussed in great detail what tapaha is, what tapasya is, what swadhyaya is, and what Ishvara Pranidhana does to one, does help us in our sadhana. So one more point I would like to say, that uh, man naturally, when he starts his spiritual quest or starts practicing yoga, he begins his spiritual journey from where he is at the present. So if an average man is asked to meditate on Purusha or the absolute Brahman, he will find it confusing because he cannot transcend duality so quickly. So he will take his time, he will not understand. He will neither grasp the truth of that ultimate reality, Purusha, the eternal reality. It may be very nice to discuss about these things, but how to conceive it? How to conceive of an absolute Brahman, an eternal Brahman which never changes? Though he can discuss about Prakriti, what Prakriti does, when we are in the midst of Prakriti, when the gunas are day and night bombarding us with so much of information, creating confusion and agitation in the mind, we cannot possibly focus that mind on Brahman because it is a concept for us right now. It's not a matter of experience. Whereas a personal God, if somebody is asked to worship a personal God as a representative of that Brahman, of that truth, then it becomes very easy. So that is the reason why Ishvara Pranidhana can be interpreted, though Patanjali, strictly speaking, the yoga school of thought does not accept the idea of avatara, but as any saintly person or any great person who has attained to that concentration, you can worship that kind of personality that is permitted. So Ishvara in that sense can be worshipped. So if somebody does his worship considering his Ishta or the god whom he worships with flowers, incense, and all the other accessories of ritualistic worship, the mind which was engaged in the worldly things will gradually become concentrated on the Ishta, though it may not be able to focus on the infinite or the absolute Brahman, whose personified version is the Ishta, but still he finds a kind of bliss and peace by surrendering the fruits and doing everything for his Lord, whom he can see. That is a slightly a lower stage, but still it helps him. So it is of vital importance. We cannot just give up the idea that a personal God can be very useful when we try to meditate on the concept of Purusha or the absolute. Then we come to Kriya Yoga also includes, by the way, the japam that we do, the japa or the repetition of the name of God also is always done. And at the end of that sadhana also, we are supposed to, just as we dedicate all the fruits of our action to the Lord, we are to dedicate the fruits of our spiritual practice or japa, or which is another form of Kriya Yoga. So this dedication of fruits of one's work to God is a spiritual exercise of vital importance for beginners, especially those who are very busy and lead very active lives. It is known as Karma Yoga, though here the word Kriya Yoga is used. It is a way where union with God through the performance of God dedicated action is accomplished. So, in following Karma Yoga, the devotee's whole life, whatever he does, becomes one unending sort of ritual. So, it's not that he performs a ritual when he is doing puja and then the rest of the time he does all the different duties that are allotted to him because of his profession or because of his swadharma. Certain duties he is supposed to do are obligatory for him. Now all those all those duties can be converted by this devotee to a sort of God dedicated action. Then all the rituals become something similar to the ritualistic puja that he's doing or the ritualistic worship that he's doing. So the whole life of the devotee or this individual, it becomes one unending ritual since every action that he does is performed as an offering of devotion to God, not in the hope of any personal gain or advantage. So surrendering the fruit of your actions and not getting disturbed, or not getting not allowing the mind to be disturbed by getting the fruits or not getting the fruits. In either case, our mind is disturbed. So all actions must be done with this spirit. And one thing is a caution has been sounded right in the beginning, that we should never offer deliberately actions that we think are wrong to the Lord, because we must do our work to the best of our ability, use our intellect. That's why Swamiji says, though it is a street cleaner, the intellect guides you as to what is our duty and what is not our duty, what is right and what is wrong, what is Shreya and what is Preya. So we have to use our intellect. Intellect can be used in this case for this purpose, and we should dedicate only our good actions and not bother about the without bothering about the result. So the best work is done according to Karma Yoga or Kriya Yoga, as it is known in this case, is to work dedicating all our actions, especially to our good actions, what we think is good and rightful, with non-attachment. Having done the best that we are capable of, then we should not be disappointed if we don't get the commensurate results. Whether we are criticized or the wonderful work that we have done is totally disregarded and nobody cares for it. Even so, if somebody praises us, we should not give way to pride or vanity if the results of our work are successful. So it may be that if you have done the work perfectly, you may get popular praise, or you may get a lot of it may result in a lot of pride and some kind of vanity. But if we know we have done the best, we should think that the knowledge that we have done the work and dedicated it to the Lord, if the work is perfect, then we should be happy that that is our legitimate reward. That is the reward which we should expect. We should not expect any other reward. Some people may praise, we may be, even after doing the work perfectly, it may be ignored, or it may be criticized sometimes, even if you have done the work perfectly. So without expecting anything, or without being indifferent to the reactions or the results, we have to do our work. So that is what the Gita also says, karmanye vadikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. So do your work without an eye on the results. That doesn't mean we have to do it haphazardly, we have to do it perfectly. And but we have, the spirit here is important. So all genuine spiritual aspirants who are really great, and they have this tremendous personal integrity, whether they get praise or blame, they don't care, but they do their duty in this with perfection. Yoga karmasu kaushalam, that dexterity or that perfection, which is itself in itself gives them a lot of joy. They may be atheists also, as some of the Buddhists. They don't believe in God, they don't believe in many things, they don't even believe in the Vedas. They just do because it is good to do their duty in a compassionate way, in an unselfish way, in a detached way, without any desire for the results. Even then, even if they are professed atheists, they do not believe in a personal God. Even then, they will not get attached to the material world, and they will not despair when their cause is apparently not recognized or doesn't get the praise it deserves. They don't bother. It's only the devotee of God, of karma yoga, or one who performs karma yoga, who never despairs, and as a result the chitta becomes uh, calm, and it's not agitated under any circumstances, whether he's praised or whether he's blamed. He will go on doing his work with non-attachment. It's not indifference. One has to make a distinction between indifference and non-attachment. Anasakti is something different than detachment, because then indifference, because indifference can tempt you or can result in the work getting spoiled. If you are indifferent in the name of detachment, then the work may get spoiled. But here, non-attachment does not, it should not be taken to mean indifference. So, and it is neither any kind of fatalism. Sometimes people are fatalists. They don't try enough and say, oh, that is what perhaps I deserved and I got what I deserved. So that kind of fatalism is also not meant, not encouraged here. The fatalist is normally seen to be very slipshod or haphazard in his work. What does it matter? Even if he tries, he feels, even if I try hard and get, since I'm not attached to results, that's the wrong understanding of the philosophy of Karma Yoga. He may say that whether I do it hard with dedication or not, since I'm not supposed to be bothered about the result, then what does it really matter? No, that is not what is meant here. The fatalist, the attitude of a fatalist towards the result of his work is not non-attachment. It is an indifference which which is because of his perhaps weakness, maybe laziness, or even some kind of fear. That's what Arjuna was arguing with Sri Krishna in the first chapter. He did not want to fight the fear, either because of some kind of strange kind of weakness or fearfulness that came to him. And he started talking about non-attachment, talking about not fighting the war and giving up everything, becoming unselfish and all those things. So these ideas, they come sometimes in a disguised, they disguise your weakness or cowardice or laziness, and in the name of Karma Yoga, and then you become fatalist. So this fatalism is not what is meant here. Kriya Yoga means working with full kaushala. Yoga karmasu kaushala. Whatever skill you have attained, you use that work, but don't be attached to the results. And that will prevent us from getting attached and from agitating our mind and attaining true yoga. So that is why to do the work in a very detached way is kaushala, is a very, it's a cleverness, it is an art. So Krishna is telling him, not only should you do it in a very skillful way, but at the same time do it with an attitude which is equally, which requires equal skills, not to get attached to the work that you're doing, and in the process agitate your mind. Now the next verse which we are coming across is about the how to cultivate the power of concentration and remove all the obstacles to enlightenment which cause all these sufferings. So samadhi bhavanartha, samadhi bhavanartha. Here samadhi means concentration. So you should not confuse it with the nirvikalpa or nirvichara samadhi. Any kind of concentration here means, power of concentration means samadhi. Samadhi bhavanartha, to cultivate the power of concentration. Klesha tanu karanarthascha. So the obstacles we have to use, remove all the obstacles. Klesha means it is a kind of, you may say it is a kind of obstacle. Pain, you can, the Swamiji has translated Klesha Tanukarana as minimizing the pain bearing obstructions. Klesha, literally it means pain bearing. Klishta, Klishta means that which gives you pain. And from Klishta word, Klesha has come. So Samadhi Bhavanartha, for the practice of Samadhi or concentration, and also to minimize the pain bearing obstructions. There are many obstructions. those have to be minimized to attain concentration. So most of us make our minds like spoiled children, allowing them to do whatever they want. So therefore, it is necessary that this Kriya Yoga or Karma Yoga should be constantly practiced in order to gain control of the mind and to bring it into some kind of subjection. It should be under our control. I mean, the reactive mind. The obstructions to yoga, the klesha or the pain-bearing obstructions. Klesha, tanukarana. Tanukarana means to reduce it, to minimize the pain-bearing obstructions. What are the pain-bearing obstructions? They are known as kleshas. The obstructions to yoga, what are these kleshas? Are because of they are caused due to lack of control. So we give way to our senses. The senses ask us to do something and we do it foolishly, and then they become these pain-bearing obstructions. We eat, we see some sweets, and we go on gobbling those sweets, and then it causes pain or suffering in the long run because of stomach ache and all those things. So without control, if anything is done, just because the reactive mind tells you to do, these give rise to pain bearing. These are known as pain bearing obstructions, or they are also known as kleshas. That which causes pain is known as a klesha. So they can be removed. Tanukarana means to minimize it, to remove it. You can't remove it totally. It is like removing the samskaras. You can hold it in check. At least don't allow it to disturb your mind or cause pain in your life. That tanukarana can be done by this concentration. So whatever control we develop, one of the through that control and also through minimizing the plane klesha tanukarana, or by the minimizing the pain bearing obstructions, we have to do this first sutra, that is Kriya Yoga. The three parts of Kriya Yoga which are explained are to be done for the reason of control of mind and also to reduce, to minimize, that is the right word, to minimize. Tanukarana means to minimize the pain bearing obstructions. Now we come to another third sutra which explains what these pain bearing kleshas are. What are the kleshaha? In plural, in Sanskrit, they are known as kleshaha. Avidya, asmita, raga, dvesha, abhinivesha. So, when they are put together, they become plural. Avidya, asmita, raga, dvesha, abhiniveshaha, kleshaha. Means kleshas are the five pain-bearing obstructions or the kleshas which affect our mind, which affect our concentration, which cause all the suffering in our life. They are 5 in number. What are they? They are avidya, ignorance; asmita, that is egoism, ahankara; raga, attachment; dvesha, aversion or hatred. So attachment, aversion is as bad as hatred. So raga and dvesha, they are two sides of the same coin. If you say I like certain things very much and I hate these things, it is the same. Whether you like something very intensely, it gives rise to attachment. It is also pain bearing. Hatred for certain things, things which you don't like, or aversion, that is also equally bad as much as attachment. And then finally, abhinivesha, which is clinging to life. That is the ultimate reason for our suffering. We cling to this body, we cling to our life, and that is not, it's supposed to be natural. A scientist will always say that survival is one of the basic instincts which uh, motivates a person to fight against it. Everybody wants to survive. Even a small ant, if you try to crush it, it will try to escape. Nobody wants to, nobody wants their own destruction. So clinging to life is a, but according to yoga, it's a pain bearing obstruction because that consumes a lot of our energy. and we try to cling on to certain things which are insignificant. We cling on to temporary life when the eternal is vanishes or escapes from us. The holding on to the eternal is more important than clinging to the lower life. It is just like as bad as clinging to avidya or ignorance, clinging to egoism, our ahankara or ego, clinging to certain things which are known as raga, attachment. Dvesha means clinging to certain or uh, having certain strong likes and dislikes. That is what raga dvesha means. Everybody, if we analyze our own life, we will find that we either like a certain thing or we hate a certain thing. Uh, any object, take up any object. You will say, oh, I like this very much. So you are get attached to it, raga. Or you hate certain things. You want to avoid these things, certain food stuff, certain people, certain things, certain situations we hate. And these are aversions in our life. It is the opposite of attachment. So we have a dvesha for these things. So both raga and dvesha are harmful because they come from our attachment to our the temporal things. So we are attached. We are attached to if we like a cold thing, then you may have raga towards the cold and dvesha towards the hot. In some cases, in other cases, some people have an aversion for cold. They like a thing which is hot. So aversion and attachment changes from person to person, but in either case, it is a pain-bearing obstruction. Why is Patanjali calling raga to be a pain-bearing obstruction? Because apparently that which you like gives you pleasure, it doesn't give you pain. But ultimately, from the ultimate standpoint of yoga, even these things, egoism also sometimes may be good, or sometimes it may be painful. Ignorance also, ignorance is, they say, sometimes is bliss. So not knowing certain things may give you temporary bliss, but still they are classified as pain bearing obstructions, because any person who is egoistic, egoism will never give one happiness. Ultimately, in the long run, when that ego is hurt or when that ego is subject to a lot of pressure, then the pain starts. So also ignorance. In the beginning, ignorance may seem to be like bliss. But if the ignorance continues beyond a certain limit, then it starts giving pain. So also attachment. You may be attached to certain things. It may give you temporary pleasure. But ultimately, in the long run, you will find even that attachment or raga causes pain. So that is why it has been classified, all the five things have been classified as kleshaha, that which gives rise to pain. Then also aversion and clinging to life. Clinging to life is abhinivesha. So everybody, this clinging to life is also, everybody might think, most of the people might think, what is this Patanjali Sutra which says that clinging to life? What he means is clinging to the temporal things is what he means here. Not clinging to the permanent or purusha. That is not abhinivesha. Abhinivesha literally means it is a kind of fear of death rather than clinging to life. So these are the five pains, the fivefold attachments or tie that binds us down, of which ignorance is the main cause, avidya. From ignorance comes all these other four, and the other four are its effects. This we have to remember. It starts from basic ignorance. Once we are ignorant of our reality, of our own real personality, then all these problems come. Egoism comes because of ignorance, attachment comes because of ignorance, aversion comes because of ignorance, and so also clinging to life. So all the kleshas are dependent on the main klesha, that is avidya. So avidya has been mentioned first. Avidya, smita, raga, dvesha, abhinivesha. These are the five kleshas. Now what else makes us miserable? Because the nature of the soul is eternal bliss. So what can make it sorrowful except ignorance, hallucination or delusion? So Swamiji says, if the soul the nature of the soul is Sat, Chit and Ananda, then where does pain come from? It comes from avidya. How? Because it makes us sorrowful. Because the ignorance gives rise to egoism, and all the other four kleshas, attachment, aversion, and clinging to life, that causes some kind of hallucination or delusion. That's why Swamiji, when somebody says, by preaching about Vedanta, you are trying to hypnotize us. Swamiji says, no, I'm trying to de-hypnotize you people. You have been already hypnotized into thinking that you are weak, you are going to die, you are strong, you are weak. Your ego makes you jump according to your sense organs. The dictates of the senses and the body make you gives rise to attachment and aversion, or even clinging to life. That is ignorance, that is hallucination, that is delusion. So when you get rid of that, the pain vanishes. Then and only then, when the kleshas, there is a tanukarana or a minimizing of this. You can't totally do away with these five kleshas. That is what Patanjali is hinting, because you are in the performing Kriya Yoga now. There are many steps to pass through. Ashtanga Yoga, you start with asana, Kriya Yoga, the asanas, the pranayama, these are all part of Kriya Yoga. Before you can gain a mastery over those things, you can't expect, all you can expect is tanukarana, or the minimizing of this pain bearing obstructions. Otherwise, adding to the pain which you already get because of natural causes, you will find that these hallucinations, this ignorance is giving rise to more pain. You are, because of our wrong thinking, because of our egoism, because of our attachment, aversion, and clinging to life, we are adding more pain bearing situations to our already sorrowful existence. So it is our ignorance that is making us miserable. So all pain of the soul, according to Patanjali, according to this sutra, is simply a delusion, which is a result of avidya, asmita, that is egoism, attachment, raga, dvesha, and abhinivesha. So all our problems, see the master stroke of Patanjali. He, instead of dealing with all our sorrows in a piecemeal manner, he goes to the root cause of everything and classifies all our pain or suffering in this world into 5 categories, or 5 reasons for the pain bearing obstructions. So there are certain obstructions which are obstructing the bliss of the soul that we should be experiencing. Why can't we, if the soul is blissful, if the Atman within or the Purusha within is of the nature of Sat, Chit and Ananda, if he is blissful, if he is eternal, then why do we feel all these things? That is because of the pain bearing obstructions, and the more we minimize it, the more happy we will be. So all the pain bearing, all our sufferings, you take any suffering, we can analyze and categorize them into these 5 categories. That is avidya, that is the root cause. Ultimately, it can be boiled down to avidya because of our ignorance. But for easier understanding of this, because avidya we cannot conceptualize, but we can conceptualize what ahankar or ego does, what attachment does, what aversion does, what clinging to life, how painful it can be. So all these troubles that we encounter, if you see, are nothing but permutations and combinations of this raga, dvesha. Say, for example, you don't like if somebody scolds you or criticizes you, because you are attached to a lower idea of your personality. You expect him always to praise you. So you are attached to your label, thinking that I am such and such a person. If I don't get recognition, I feel sorrowful. So the sorrow comes there not because somebody has said something, but because of your attachment to the label which you try to associate yourself with. You have a particular label that I am a good man, and somebody says, or you are a fool, and that causes some kind of klesha because of that attachment. So all our reactions, all our sufferings, you can say, are a result of attachment, aversion, raga, dvesha, abhinivesha, and also avidya and asmita, the ego. So ultimately, they are the result of avidya only. But avidya gives rise to four other effects, which are ego, attachment, aversion, and clinging to life. So these are the five kleshas. We have to understand that. And now we will come to another topic, the fourth sutra, which before that we'll just try to find out. Yes, now we come to uh, the fourth sutra, which says avidya. 1 minute, I'll just avidya kshetram uttaresham prasupta tanu vicchinno dharanam. That means, I'll read it again, I'll split it. Avidya kshetra uttaresham prasupta tanu vichinna udaranam. So the meaning is, avidya is the main thing which creates all other obstacles. So they may exist in potential or a rudimentary form, or they may have been temporarily overcome or fully developed. So they can be udara or they can be vichinna. Vichinna means they are temporarily overcome, but they may be udara or they may be, or no, prasupta means that which is in a potential form. So when these kleshas, these other obstacles, ignorance is the productive field of, productive field means it is the cause of all that follow. What are the other kleshas? Whether they are dormant, Swamiji's translation is much better. He calls prasupta as dormant. Prasupta means, supta means to sleep. So they are dormant. Or prasupta tanu, attenuated, or they are reduced in power, or overpowered, vichinna, or expanded, udara, if they are udara. So these are the four conditions. Kleshas can exist uh, kleshas can exist in four different levels, at four different levels. But all the four kleshas comes from ignorance alone. So avidya is the productive field, is the base. Because of avidya only, you have these other four kleshas in four different levels. Some may be potential, some may be dormant. That is prasupta. Avidya kshetram uttaresham means all the uttar means all the other four. You see, I told you there are five kleshas. The first is avidya. That gives rise to four other kleshas: raga, dvesha, abhinivesha, and asmita. Asmita, raga, dvesha, abhinivesha. So these four kleshas, or the pain-bearing obstructions, can be in four different forms. What these four different forms we'll learn as we consider the next sutras. They may be dormant. They may be dormant. They may be prasupta. They may not be very clearly visible. These kleshas are there. We think we don't have these kleshas. We don't have ego because it has been pressed down. It has been dormant because they are not manifesting. They are not apparent on the surface. But or they may be in a very, very minor way they may be affecting us, that is attenuated. Tanu. Tanu means they are very small, insignificant. We have an ego, but it is very insignificant. We have raga, but it is very insignificant. They are attenuated. Or then is vichinna means we have overpowered it. There are certain tendencies, raga, dvesha, abhinivesha, which we have by our actions, by our effort, overpowered it. Or there may be some samskaras which have been expanded. Udara means they have been expanded. So these the four different types of states of the samskaras or the kleshas are the result. They are born out of ignorance. So avidya is the main source, and from that the dormant or the prasupta, the attenuated. The prasupta means the potential or the dormant kleshas. Either of these four kleshas, all the four kleshas can be in dormant state. Your raga can be dormant in certain cases. Your dvesha, your hatred, you may not express it because they are dormant. You don't show that hatred. But when the right time comes, you may express your hatred. You will control it, or maybe you have overpowered it right now because the situation demands that you don't express your pleasure or displeasure, raga or dvesha. You can't openly say, I like this or I don't like this. Uh, these things, sometimes we see in life, there are situations where we have to overpower our emotions. We may be hating somebody, but we can't express it. So in that case, it becomes overpowered. Or sometimes we express it openly, that it becomes, that same klesha becomes udara. We very clearly tell that we are not happy with you or with some person or with something. Then that klesha has become udara or expanded. We have expanded it to such an extent that we make it clear to the people what we like, what we don't like. So, and then overpowered, attenuated, and sometimes we have managed by our sadhana to reduce its intensity. That is also possible. By intense karma yoga or kriya yoga, we sometimes manage to reduce the impact of our impact of these kleshas. So the sutra, this fourth sutra means ignorance is the cause of all our egoism. That is, avidya gives rise to asmita or ego, attachment, raga, dvesha, and abhinivesha. But these impressions exist in different states. Sometimes they are dormant. One example is often given, that you say that this person is as innocent as a baby. Yet in the baby, for example, in a small child, there may be a demon hidden. It will come out in degrees. So when you say innocent as a baby, innocent as he is as innocent as a child. Yes, right now he is innocent, but that same baby who shows his innocence may turn out to be a demon or a god. He may turn out to be a very bad man, because in childhood practically all the kleshas or all the samskaras are in a very, very dormant form. They are not seen. That's why all children look alike. And we say that all children are innocent. They are really innocent because their samskaras have not started expressing. They have not become udara. But they will come out in degrees. It depends on what samskaras we are born with, what baggage of karma we are born with. Then correspondingly, when the child grows, all these dormant samskaras will start expressing. In the yogi, these expressions, the samskaras left by past actions, are attenuated. So in a child, they are dormant, but the case where they are tanu or attenuated, they are, that happens only in yogis. So the yogis, with lot of effort, they say, no, I should not be a victim of my kleshas. So they try to attenuate it. They tanu karana, that is what is meant by tanu karana. By constantly performing kriya yoga, by doing tapasya, swadhyaya, and ishvara pranidhana, they go on doing good works so that their kleshas do not trouble them. They exist in a very fine state, and we can control them. We can see that we don't allow them to manifest and create problems with us and create pain bearing. They know they are no longer pain bearing obstructions for us because they have become tanu. So this is possible only for yogis. Overpowered sometimes means one set of impressions is held down for a while by other impressions which are stronger. For example, there are certain bad things which you should not do. So you use the good things. You know anger is bad, and you try to control it with some other emotion, by trying to be positive even when you are provoked. So you are trying to overpower the negative emotion of anger by another emotion, which is love, or which is some kind of kindness or compassion. And then you, though the anger is bubbling up, you try to control it. That is what is meant by overpowered. That is vichinna. So, and then finally, the last state is known as, but once the props are removed or the repressing force is removed, these samskaras will come out. So overpowering is not the solution. Tanukarana is much better than, or the attenuation of the kleshas are better, because repression, sometimes when the repressive forces, your self-control breaks down, then suddenly you will burst into anger. So even the most peaceful of people, sometimes, because he had repressed his anger for a long time, but when the situation goes out of control, he cannot repress his anger anymore. That vichinna, that somehow he was holding that anger from rising to the surface, it suddenly bursts, and the repressing cause, that force which was responsible for holding the anger down, will, when it is removed, the anger will manifest itself. So that is the vichinna state, which is not a good state. And then finally we come to the last state, which is known as udara, expanded, when the samskaras, which because of the helpful surroundings attain to a great activity, either as good or evil. So there is no inhibition. The person who has a udara kleshas, if he is good, he will be intensely, he'll do all good activities. But if he has a preponderance of evil activities or evil samskaras, or evil kleshas, if he has hatred, then he will become a very hateful personality. He will start hating everybody. So whenever the situation helps, the udara samskaras, they become udara. When the surrounding is conducive, suppose you are in a very peaceful atmosphere, then those samskaras which conduce to peace will become prominent, which will express. But at the same time, if a lot of pressure, if you are in a situation where everybody is trying to push you down, then you react in that particular way. So that is what is meant by mm, uh, having the udara state. So our kleshas, to conclude now, I'll not take the idea of avidya, the sutra 5, which describes what avidya is. Then they will describe each one of the kleshas, one sutra for each one of them. How avidya leads, what is avidya, what is asmita or ego, what is raga, what is dvesha, and what is abhinivesha. So all the 5 kleshas are discussed in great detail, but we'll not start it today. So let us conclude after this 4th verse, and if there are some questions, I will answer. So let me see. One question is, the first question is, even if we are dedicating our work and its results to the Lord, shouldn't we offer only our best work, since offering anything less will not be good bhakti? Yes, that is what Swamiji is warning us, because the law of karma says that if you offer good, you should not offer bad things to the Lord. I'm not talking of offering good or bad. You have to strive to do excellent work. You have to strive to offer the best work, offer everything, in fact. And that means that you have to try to do your best in everything, but then don't bother about what the results are. You should not be attached to the result. That is the only condition which is laid down for this kind of surrendering the fruits of. You are asked to surrender the fruits, not to surrender the work. The work has to be done in a positive way, in a good way, in the best possible way you can. There may be mistakes. There may be mistakes, because no man is born perfect. But whatever you, if you have given it your best, then the work has to be good. So that it's not just for the sake of good bhakti, but it is for your own purpose, because here Patanjali does not speak of bhakti. He is just asking you to dedicate. So it's pure law of karma, that whatever you offer, you will get the result. So definitely, if you offer bad things, if you offer wrongly done things or incomplete things, or if you commit deliberate mistakes, if you don't try your best when you can, I'm not saying that, Patanjali is not saying that don't offer only perfect things. He says offer everything, but see that you are doing your best. So when we do Kriya Yoga with non-attachment, our best work is done. And whatever we have done, according to our capacity, we offer it and the Lord rewards us accordingly. Yeah. So now there is another question. All hindrance obstacles come from lack of knowledge or avidya, ignorance. Is that so? Hence that needs to be eliminated. Yes, yes, we'll come to that in the fifth sutra. Now, this is a good question. Everything is a result of avidya. All the other hindrances, obstacles, or pain-bearing obstructions, which are known as kleshas, are a result of avidya. But what avidya is, one has to understand even before trying to eliminate it. So what is avidya? We will discuss in the next class. If I start now, it's a very big topic. So what avidya really means and how it leads to asmita, raga, dvesha, and abhinivesha, and how to eliminate it is will be the subject of discussion in the next class. But what you said is correct. It is definitely avidya which leads to all the other four kleshas. So another is, in a spiritual context, what is the difference between repression and suppression? It is very easy. The repression and suppression, of course, you just, if you see the two words, when you repress or when you suppress, repression is normally an unconscious process. So when you suppress, you do it consciously. So suppression is not the ideal way. Tanukarana is the best. Attenuation of our kleshas are the best possible way how to reduce its impact by constantly doing good work. But sometimes it may be necessary to suppress certain things. You are suddenly in a situation where you are not supposed to be angry. So you have to suppress your anger for some time. But it should be a constant effort. There is a subtle difference. When you repress, it's normally a fear. If you are afraid of somebody and you are not able to react, then it is a repression. There is some strange fear that if I react now, my boss will be angry, I might lose my job. That is a kind of repression. But if you do it with consciously, that you see this person is ignorant, I should not be angry on him. Though the anger is rising up, you consciously try to put it down. So that is vichinna avastha, where you suppress. But it can be unconscious, it can be conscious. If it is unconscious, it is repression. If it is a conscious effort on your part, knowing that it is harmful, then it is suppression. Both are bad, but repression is more dangerous because you are doing it unconsciously and not consciously. So it is always better to suppress certain things. So from the Vedantic point of view, or from the yoga point of view, or even from the point of view of psychology, suppression is always superior to repression. Okay. So I'll take your leave now. I think the time is over. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu. So tomorrow, as usual, we will have the Gita class at 5:45 p.m. And I hope all of you have seen the WhatsApp message where I have started a new series of classes on Thursday. So that will be a regular class on the Great Master. We had an introductory talk on what this Great Master is, what that book can do to us as spiritual aspirants, especially those who have been connected with Sri Ramakrishna as their Ishta or as their ideal even if they are not formally initiated, the reading or understanding the great master or Sri Sri Ramakrishna Leela Prasang, that is the Bengali name. So it has been translated into English. So those who want to attend and those who want to follow the text can just send a WhatsApp message to me. I'll send them the text of the great master. I didn't want to send it to everybody in the WhatsApp group because it is almost 80 MB. So I don't want to send such a big file to everybody who really doesn't want to read it. But those who are keen and those who want to have a copy so that they can refer to it, because it's a very important book for all of us, especially those who are attending the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna class. It is an important book in the sense, without knowing the life of Sri Ramakrishna, because his life was his message. So the message or the wonderful teachings of his, as we get them through the Kathamrita, where we come across in the Kathamrita or the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, can be better understood by understanding the great master in great detail. The book Great Master is a very well, it's a classic where Swami Shardanand has tried to explain with the help of reason, with the help of all logic and many things, giving a background of Indian culture, the history of our spirituality, of Indian spirituality, and everything. He has given the proper background in the light of which we can understand the life, wonderful life of Sri Ramakrishna better. And in the process, if we understand that life properly, we'll be in a position to understand his message. And then hopefully, by his grace, we can apply it in our day-to-day lives. So I take your leave. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.